Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. The United Kingdom, Germany and France say Iran's nuclear activity is deeply worrying. In a joint statement, they raised concerns over Iran's new law that obliges the government to halt UN inspection of its nuclear sites. Tehran has announced further uranium enrichment following the assassination of its top nuclear scientist last month. In France, President Emmanuel Macron says he will not condition the future sale of French arms to Egypt on human rights. He said this at a joint press conference with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who earlier arrived in Paris on a three-day visit. The two leaders also discussed bilateral ties and the situation in Libya. Turkey says it will not bow to threats in its dispute with Greece and Cyprus over maritime claims in the eastern Mediterranean. However, President Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara wants negotiations over the claims to continental shelves and energy resources. Erdogan's statement comes as European Union foreign ministers are meeting today in Brussels to discuss the issue. China says it will firmly oppose and strongly condemns U.S. interference in its domestic affairs. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said Beijing will take the legitimate measures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. The ministry issued a statement over a media report that Washington is preparing new sanctions on Chinese officials. The global number of coronavirus cases has topped 67 million, while the virus has claimed over 1.5 million lives. Britain says it will procure up to 4 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as the country's death toll exceeds 61,000. The disease has claimed more than 140,000 lives in India, while its caseload has exceeded 9.6 million. Pakistan has registered nearly 3,800 cases, 37 deaths overnight, taking the toll to 8,398. And in cricket, England's one-day international tour of South Africa has been cancelled on medical grounds after a series of coronavirus cases. One South Africa player and two hotel staff tested positive from within a biosecure hotel in Cape Town. Earlier, England said they had two unconfirmed positive results among their touring party. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. The United Kingdom, Germany and France says Iran's nuclear activity is deeply worrying. In a joint statement, they raised concerns over Iran's new law that obliges the government to halt UN inspections of its nuclear sites. Iran has earlier revealed plans to install an additional 3 cascades of advanced centrifuge at its nuclear plant in Natanz. The European powers fear the move will jeopardize efforts to protect the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. They say Iran's actions will risk the return to diplomacy with U.S. President-elect Joe Biden administration. Tensions over Iran's nuclear program have risen after the assassination of its top nuclear scientist last month. Tehran blamed Israel for the attack and said Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was killed with an artificial intelligence machine gun controlled by satellite. The top U.S. Navy official in the Middle East says America has reached an uneasy deterrence with Iran. Tensions remain high over Tehran's nuclear program after months of regional attacks and seizures at the sea. Vice Admiral Sam Paparo, who oversees the Navy's 5th Fleet based in Bahrain, was speaking to a think tank. He described having a healthy respect for both Iran's Navy and its paramilitary Revolutionary Guard. He said he found Iranian activity at sea to be cautious and circumspect and respectful. Meanwhile, Tehran said Iran's naval forces have always professionally conducted themselves. A spokesperson for Iran's UN mission questioned what the U.S. Navy was doing 7,000 miles from its territorial waters. Newly appointed Syrian Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad has met with his Iranian counterpart Jawad Zarif in Tehran. This is Mekdad's first regional trip as Syria's top diplomat. Iran's foreign ministry said the two discussed bilateral and international issues as well as the joint fight against terrorism. It said Zarif called for a consultation between Damascus and Tehran due to the recent regional developments. The ministry said Mekdad will meet Iran's top officials in the next few days. He succeeded Walid Muallim as the foreign minister on the 22nd of November after the veteran diplomat died days before. In France, President Emmanuel Macron says he will not condition the future sale of French arms to Egypt on human rights. He said this at a joint press conference with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who earlier arrived in Paris on a 3-day visit. The French president said he does not want to weaken Cairo's ability to counter terrorism in the region. The two leaders also discussed bilateral ties in the situation in Libya. President el-Sisi stressed the need to intensify consultations for regional peace and stability. Egypt has concluded several arms deals with France since 2015, but human rights groups accuse Macron of turning a blind eye to violations of freedom in Egypt. In the UK, thousands of people protested in London over agricultural reforms in India. Police made 13 arrests over breaches of COVID regulations. A crowd of demonstrators converged outside the Indian embassy in London. People also marched in groups around the Trafalgar Square area. Earlier, 36 British lawmakers wrote a letter to Foreign Minister Dominic Raab calling for an urgent meeting. The lawmakers said the matter is an issue of concern for Sikhs in the United Kingdom. The newfound laws in India have drawn international condemnation. Farmers have described them as a death warrant. But several rounds of talks to achieve a breakthrough have remained unsuccessful. In Afghanistan's southern Kandahar province, a car bomb has targeted Daman district governor's compound near the police headquarters. A spokesman for the governor said 33 people, including 11 security personnel, were injured in the blast. Officials say the district police chief is also among those injured. They said the police headquarters building is also damaged in the blast. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the blast. The Saudi-led military coalition says it destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthis. Saudi media quoted the coalition as saying that the drone targeted civilians. Cross-border attacks by Yemeni rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. Last month, Houthi rebels targeted a petroleum products domestic distribution facility in Jeddah. In 2015, the Arab coalition intervened in Yemen after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government from Sana'a. 5 Yemeni separatists have been killed by suspected al-Qaeda gunmen in Abyan province. This marks the group's biggest terror attack in the region since August. Security officials say the gunmen managed to escape after the attack, but the group has not claimed responsibility for the attack. Yemen has been marred by the 5-year-old civil war between Saudi-led coalition and Houthi rebels that has killed tens of thousands so far. Turkey says it will not bow to threats in its dispute with Greece and Cyprus over maritime claims in the eastern Mediterranean. In a video message, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan said Ankara wants negotiations over the claims to continental shelves and energy resources. Erdogan said Turkey has never sided with the issue, but promoted peace, cooperation, and the establishment of justice. He said problems can only be solved by bringing all the actors in the region to the negotiating table. Earlier, Germany said European foreign ministers would discuss measures against Turkey at their meeting today. Turkey says it has neutralized 11 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party during a counter-terrorist operation in Iraq. The National Defense Ministry said airstrikes were carried out in the Zab and Haftanan regions. It said nearly 500 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months. Ankara vowed to continue to destroy weapon caches and shelters used by the terrorists. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. Ethiopia has denied reports that rebellious northern forces are mounting a guerrilla war from the mountains of Tigray. In a statement, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Tigray's People Liberation Front is pushing a false narrative. Abiy said the front's claim that its fighters are well armed to risk a protracted insurgency in the rugged mountains of Tigray is false. He said the front is also lying about undertaking strategic retreat with its capability and regional government apparatus intact. He said the front is thoroughly defeated and in disarray, with insufficient capability to mount an insurgency. The Tigray conflict has killed hundreds of people and has enforced thousands more to flee to the neighboring states. Over in the U.S. state of Georgia, a Republican governor has rejected President Donald Trump's push to overturn the election results. In an interview, the deputy governor said the state is not going to move goalposts at this point in the election. Jeff Duncan said Governor Brian Kemp will not come to any pressure to call a special session of state legislature. Duncan said he voted and campaigned for the U.S. president, but he did not win the state of Georgia. He stated the Constitution is still in place and Biden would be sworn in as 46th U.S. president. The statement comes a day after President Trump asked Kemp to overturn Biden's win in the state. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden has picked California Attorney General Xavier Becerra to be his health secretary. China says it firmly opposes and strongly condemns U.S. interference in its domestic affairs. The foreign minister issued a statement over a media report that Washington is preparing new sanctions on Chinese officials. Spokeswoman Hua Chunying said Beijing will take the legitimate measures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. At a press briefing, she also condemned U.S. sanctions on the Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department. Earlier, Washington also imposed visa restrictions on Chinese officials for their alleged action against critics. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has vowed accountability for the families of Christchurch mosque attack victims. Her statement comes ahead of the public release of a major report into the country's worst massacre. The inquiry looked at whether there were any failings by government agencies and if the mass shooting could have been prevented. Authorities were criticized for ignoring repeated warnings from the Muslim community that hate crimes against them were escalating. The report contains interviews with hundreds of people, including security agencies, Muslim community leaders, and international experts. An Australian white supremacist was sentenced to life in prison without parole in August for killing 51 Muslim worshippers. In Belarus, police have arrested more than 300 protesters demanding resignation of President Alexander Lukashenko. The demonstrations prompted the police to detain over 300 people. Thousands marched in remote residential areas of the capital Minsk, chanting slogans and waving flags with the opposition symbol. Military vehicles and uniformed men in helmets were seen on the streets of Minsk. The Interior Ministry says the detainees were arrested for violating the COVID-19 protocols against mass gatherings. President Lukashenko has rejected demands of demonstrators, calling them a West-sponsored agenda. The East European country has been rocked by mass demonstrations since the presidential election in August. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now moving on to the global number of coronavirus cases has topped 67 million with over 1.5 million deaths. The U.S. remains the worst affected country, while India has the second highest tally of COVID-19 cases in the world. More on coronavirus in the following report.
While mass vaccination drives against the deadly coronavirus kindle hopes of the beginning of the end of the pandemic, deaths and new cases worldwide are shooting through the roof. U.S. President Donald Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has also tested positive for the coronavirus. Reporting more than 200,000 daily cases for the fourth consecutive day, the U.S. government says the country is facing the worst event in its history.
This is not just the worst public health event. This is the worst event that this country will face, not just from a public health side. Yet, we know what behaviors spread the virus, and we know how to change those behaviors to stop spreading the virus.
Over in Europe, testing has been suspended in parts of the Austrian Alps after massive amounts of snow fell in the region. Italy, one of the worst hit parts of Europe, announced more travel restrictions for the Christmas period. Britain says it will procure up to 4 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as the country's death toll exceeds 61,000. Meanwhile, a tiny Belgian town has become the ground zero in the fight against coronavirus as Pfizer turns the town into one of its largest production sites in the world.
We always say that we are going to save the world, and that's the feeling in our town. The people are glad that we can give a contribution and to leave this difficult period for a lot of people.
Over in Asia, Serum Institute of India, world's largest vaccine producer by volume, has sought emergency use authorization for AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. India has reported nearly 33,000 cases and 391 fatalities in the last 24 hours, while Indonesia received its first shipment of vaccine from China as the government prepares a mass inoculation program.
Now moving on to Pakistan, 37 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, pushing the death toll to 8,205. Health officials say more than 3,700 tested positive for the virus overnight. They say with 39,000 tests conducted across Pakistan, the positivity rate has reached 9.7%. The health ministry says there are more than 55,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of more than 420,000 countrywide cases, over 356,000 have recovered. Pakistan says developing states need $2 to $3 trillion to revive their economies in the wake of COVID-19's adverse impacts. In an interview, Pakistan's envoy to UN, Munir Akram, said developing states do not have financial capacity to recover from the pandemic. Munir Akram said economic collapse is confronting a number of vulnerable countries. He said consequences of the developing world's economic collapse will be devastating for the world economy as a whole. Akram added, in a bid to keep the economies afloat during the pandemic, many countries are falling into debt. He said the developed world needs to take urgent actions to meet the needs of developing countries, otherwise it will be a humanitarian disaster. In India, one person has died and 350 have been hospitalized by an unidentified mystery illness in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh. The cause of disease has not been determined yet. The unknown disease has become a cause of grave concern for the people. Doctors say people sick with the disease include both young and old alike. Medical practitioners say they have observed symptoms of dizziness, nausea, headache, and epilepsy in the victims. Health Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Kali Krishna Srinivas, says medical help is being provided to the patients.
Doctors are trying to find the reason for the en masse sickness. All the patients are stable now. A girl has been sent to Vijayawada for further treatment. A team of doctors have gone to the area where the people felt sick and are conducting medical tests in every house in that area.
In Romania, Prime Minister Ludovic Orban has claimed victory in Sunday's parliamentary elections. However, one exit poll showed the opposition Socialist Democrats leading by a thin margin. Polls showed the centrist USR plus Orban's likely coalition partner at roughly 16% of the vote. Orban is expected to get the nomination to form a coalition government from President Klaus Iohannis. Even if the final results show him slightly behind the socialists, turnout was the lowest since Romania shed communism in a bloody revolt in 1989. The election is crucial in determining the developing country's future in mainstream Europe. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's Socialist Party has won the parliamentary elections boycotted by the opposition. Electoral officials say pro-Maduro candidates clinched more than 65% of seats in the National Assembly. In a televised address, Maduro hailed the win as a gigantic electoral victory. Meanwhile, opposition leader Juan Guaido has lambasted the vote as a fraud. The election was marred by an opposition boycott and voter turnout as low as 31%. Maduro's government has been hit by U.S. sanctions as Washington maintains that Guaido is a true leader of Venezuela. In Australia, more than 60,000 koalas were killed, injured or displaced in last summer's bushfires. The Worldwide Fund calls it a deeply disturbing number for a species already in trouble. A WWF study reveals that the bushfires affected 3 billion animals. It says the Kangaroo Island in South Australia was worst hit, with nearly 40,000 koalas impacted. The WWF aims to double the number of koalas by 2050 through a program called Regenerate Australia. The bushfires, dubbed the Black Summer, killed 33 people and scorched 24 million hectares of land last year. Meanwhile, firefighters have managed to keep a large bushfire that came within 700 meters of a small township on Fraser Island at bay. Pakistan has recently linked an agreement with a private British automobile firm for the manufacturing of electric buses. This will save up to $31 million worth of fuel expenses on an annual basis. More in this report by our correspondent Manal Ahmed.
Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, will be the first city to have environment-friendly electric transport by next year. The draft of agreement was signed by Science and Technology Minister Fawad Chaudhry and the British firm CEO. The minister says a Swiss charging station company is expected to build a manufacturing plant in Pakistan.
We have at least 2 big electric bus manufacturers who are establishing manufacturing in Pakistan. Likewise, we have the charging station company, Swiss charging station company, who has now shown interest to put up a manufacturing plant as far as EV chargers are concerned. So that will be another big industry, and I think these two will change Pakistan's future export market.
In the first phase, the British firm will manufacture electric buses for Pakistan. While in the second, more crucial phase, it will help the country in the production of vehicles locally. CEO of the automobile manufacturing firm, Azam Khan, said the company will also introduce 3 and 2 electric wheelers in the country.
We have come up with a project of electric buses, 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers. So we are starting with electric buses first, and we'll be having an assembly plant in Pakistan.
Director of the firm, Saqib Noor, said through their projects, they aim to achieve zero emissions.
Our slogan is zero emission, to attain the zero emission and social impact through bringing the ecosystem. And for that, we have the e-mobility, the electric cars, and the e-housing as well. So we have but at the moment we are starting with Pakistan with the e-mobility.
The initial plan is to roll out 30 electric buses across Islamabad, hoping to make it the region's first city with all-electric public transport. In future, other cities like Lahore and Karachi will also welcome emission-free transport. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
An Indian jeweler has set a Guinness World Record for most diamond in a single ring. There are more than 12,000 diamonds in the ring, weighing 165.45 grams. More about the ring in this report.
With a hope to receive international recognition, Renani Jewels in India has made a ring with 12,638 diamonds. They have dubbed the ring as the Marigold, meaning the ring of prosperity. It was Renani Jewels and Managing Director Harshad Bansal's dream to achieve a Guinness World Records title.
This ring took around 2.5 to 3 years of my life. How can I put a price on 3 years of my life? It is priceless for us.
Bansal said all of the diamonds on the ring were of the best qualities used in jewelry worldwide. It took the jewelers 3 years to conceptualize and design the record-making ring. They used 38.08 carat natural diamonds for the ring.
When I was doing a course for jewelry designing around 2.5 years ago, this idea came to me to make a ring which has more than 10,000 diamonds. I started conceptualizing the ring then, when I was learning. Slowly, I made several designs. Family also supported me, and it finally happened.
The previous record was set with 7,801 diamonds.
In an updated pagan rite, COVID-19 masks now adorn healing trees in northern France. When all else fails, people hang them on branches to pray for protection against the pandemic. More about this ritual in this report.
It is a ritual steeped in pagan mystery, updated for the coronavirus age. Sick people in northern France occasionally leave garments in healing trees in the hope of a cure, following a tradition that persists since pre-Roman times.
Here we are in front of a ritual tree where people ask for healing. It's a tree that dates back to antiquity, before the Roman times. People would come here to hang clothing which has been in contact with the body parts that need to be healed.
But locals who pay attention have noticed a recent change.
The new development in 2020 is COVID masks. What's interesting about the COVID masks is that all this clothing hanging from an ancient ritual are linked to finding a cure, to heal an illness. But I think hanging the masks is a preventive act to protect oneself from potential harm.
Known as rag trees in Ireland, one of several other countries where the practices survives, they show pagan and Christian influences. Despite appearances which can be disconcerting, they still bring people hope. People turn to the healing tree when medicine has reached its limits and when science has let them down.
SpaceX has successfully launched an upgraded Dragon cargo spacecraft on a resupply mission to the International Space Station. The SpaceX Falcon 9 was launched from Kennedy Space Center's launch complex in Florida. The spacecraft is expected to dock autonomously with the Zenith port of the space station's Harmony module today. The Dragon flying a mission designated CRS-21 is carrying over 2,900 kilograms of cargo. The upgraded Dragon capsule can now carry around 20% more volume than the previous version. The launch marked a milestone 100th successful launch of a Falcon 9 over 101 missions for SpaceX. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. And now moving on to the business stories, China's exports have seen fastest ever monthly growth in November as its factories continue to benefit from global lockdowns. Exports rocketed by 21.1% from November previous year, with imports rising by 4.5%. China's custom agency says shipments in November surged at the fastest pace in 3 years. Beijing's trade surplus for November jumped to $75.42 billion, up by almost 103% from 2019, the largest since 1981. Improved domestic demand and higher commodity prices helped the trade figures surpass forecasts by analysts. The world's second largest economy has recorded a growth in exports for the 6th month in a row now. U.S. stocks have dropped after a record-setting session as traders worry about rising coronavirus cases. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 trading lower by about 0.25%, while the Nasdaq Composite is trading marginally higher. Meanwhile, oil prices tumbled as a continued surge in infections globally forced a series of renewed lockdowns. Strict new measures on the world's top oil consumer, Southern California, also affected oil prices. European stocks are trading lower as investors monitor last-ditch efforts by the UK and EU to reach a post-Brexit trade deal. The pan-European stock 600 slipped close to 1% as majority sectors declined. Frankfurt's DAX and Italy's FTSE MIB have slid almost 1%. London's FTSE is hovering around the flat line, while the CAC 40 in Paris has slipped more than 1%. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed. Mainland Chinese, Hong Kong and Japanese shares shed, while South Korean and Australian bourses gained. In cricket, England's one-day international tour of South Africa has been cancelled on medical grounds after a series of coronavirus cases. One South Africa player and 2 hotel staff tested positive from within a BASECURE hotel in Cape Town. Earlier, England said they had 2 unconfirmed positive results among their touring party. The cricket boards of the both countries say they will review options to reschedule the series. England have already won a 3-match 2020 series against South Africa 3-0. Pakistan's cricket team has been cleared to leave managed isolation in Christchurch after the 5th round of COVID testing. The team had their training exemptions revoked last week after 10 people out of the 53-member squad tested positive. Pakistan are to head to Queenstown for intra-squad warm-up matches before the 2020 series starts on December 18. They will leave behind 1 member who will join them after completing his managed isolation period. Pakistan will play 3 2020 matches and 2 tests in New Zealand, while a Pakistan A tour is being run concurrently. Earlier, Pakistan announced an 18-member squad for the 2020 series. The 3-match series will begin on December 18 and end on December 22nd. Babar Azam will lead the green team, while Shadab Khan will serve as a vice-captain. In football, AC Milan beat Sampdoria 2-1 in a Serie A encounter at Luigi Ferraris. Milan are now 5 points clear on top of the table, followed by Inter Milan and Napoli. Frank Cassi put the visitors ahead in the first half, while Samu Castillejo doubled Milan's lead in the 77th minute. Albin Ekdal did put 1 back, but Sampdoria failed to find an equalizer. In another fixture, Napoli thrashed Crotone 4-0 at Stadio Yoshida. Lorenzo Insigne put Napoli ahead at the interval, and second-half goals from Hirving Lozano, Diego Demi and Andrea Petagna completed the scoreline for Napoli. Meanwhile, Liverpool thrashed Wolverhampton Wanderers 4-0 to go second in the Premier League table. The defending champions are now tied with the leaders Tottenham with 24 points from 11 fixtures. Mohamed Salah gave Liverpool the lead in the first half after Wolves defender Conor Coady misjudged a long ball from Jordan Henderson. Second-half goals from Jorginho, Wijnaldum, Joel Matip and Nelson Semedo made the scoreline 4-0 at the final whistle. Some 2,000 spectators were allowed to Anfield for the first time since March. In another fixture, Spurs beat Arsenal 2-0 at home. Son Heung-min and Harry Kane scored goals for the hosts. And in the German Bundesliga, Bayer Leverkusen beat Schalke 3-0 at Waltons Arena. With this win, Leverkusen moved up to second and closed the gap with leaders Bayern Munich to 1 point. Leverkusen opened their account with an own goal from Malik Thiaw in the 10th minute. Second-half goals from Julian Baumgartlinger and Patrick Schick were enough to seal 3 crucial points for Leverkusen. Schalke are winless from 26 league games and sit at the foot of the table on 3 points. Retired boxing champion Floyd Mayweather Jr. has announced to take on YouTuber Logan Paul in a special exhibition fight in February 2021. The former 5-weight boxing world champion Mayweather ended his career unbeaten in 50 bouts. Mayweather last fought in 2017, beating MMA star Conor McGregor in one of the richest bouts in boxing history. The fight is the latest exhibition bout featuring aging former champions and celebrities. Former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson returned to the ring last month to face Roy Jones Jr. in a charity exhibition fight. The bout was ruled a draw. Russian as well as some international riders performed stunts on motorcycles and snowmobiles during an extreme sports festival in Moscow. Despite the coronavirus, the annual event took place with measures restricting the number of spectators. More in the following report.
Keeping the spirit to live wildly alive, Russia held the annual Extreme Sports Festival in Moscow for the 14th time. At a time when coronavirus pandemic has restricted lives, the festival was held with limited capacity. However, not all overseas riders who usually come to the festival from abroad were able to attend this year due to a travel ban.
We all understand this. Despite the really tough restrictions, I would like to say special thanks to the sports department, to all the people involved in this, who despite such difficulties organize events and support sports. Yes, we are facing various difficulties, even with the arrival of the athletes from abroad, so that they can take part in this big festival. Unfortunately, some of them did not manage to do that. I hope this is for a very short period of time.
A total of 131 participants demonstrated stunts on FMX and BMX bikes, cars, scooters, and snowmobiles. Last year, 180 participants came to Moscow for the event. Performers said they hope the pandemic to be over soon so life can return to normal.
So to come here and perform in Moscow, especially with the pandemic as it is at the moment, it's very, very similar. What you guys are experiencing here, we're experiencing exactly the same in the UK and the rest of Europe. We're just starting to come out of it. As long as everybody's sensible, follow the guidelines, you wear your masks when you need to wear your mask.
Russian authorities have not imposed a nationwide lockdown as they did earlier in the pandemic. They are stressing the importance of hygiene and targeting measures in certain regions instead.
And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.